Hello and welcome back to the Toffee Blues YouTube channel, your source for all things Everton. My name's Thomas, joined today as always by Terry McAllister and our very special guest. The Esk is back. Paul has come to talk about, well, it's been a very busy week as an Everton fan. It's been an excellent week in terms of the news that's been released, but some of the most major news obviously that came out was the approval of the new Bramley-Moore Dock stadium. And there's a meeting in the council. It's all been decided now. So very exciting news. We do know that, well, we should be moving into the ground in a few years. And also Ancelotti today mentioning that he wants to be the manager, which is just kind of the cherry on top of the cake. But Terry, I'll come to you first. What were your just initial reactions when it all came out?
Just same as everyone else, just elation. I don't think, you can never say never, but I don't think there was a lot of people who felt like, oh, this is not going to go through. I think there was a lot of confidence that it was going to be approved because the club had been so thorough in their presentation and their due diligence and research and what have you. But you never know. There's always the outside chance that something could go wrong and, it's all start to spiral, crash and burn. But we got over the major hurdle. It was unanimously approved by the council, and now it's on the desk of the Secretary of State, and just waiting for the okay for that. It's still not there yet, but it's almost there. I can see the finish line. So I was over the moon. It's the biggest thing to happen to Everton in my lifetime, easily, and probably in anyone's lifetime.
Yeah, it was absolutely massive news. Obviously, there was a bit of discussion with Historic England about, they don't want to ruin the dock. But I mean, that was all kind of dismissed fairly quickly. Paul, what were your initial reactions?
I think the club did really well in terms of how it's gone through the whole process. And that might sound a little bit unusual for me because I'm normally quite critical of what the club do. I mean, there are certain aspects of it that on reflection they could have done differently, but, in terms of actually preparing for the planning approval, I think the club did a really good job. I think Terry's right to say that, whilst everybody is, elated and thinks that this is an absolute cert, there is still a small element of risk in terms of, what the government say, and in fact what UNESCO say to the government. So until actually it comes back from the government, I'm going to sort of reserve just a little bit of judgment on it in terms of it being a cert, but look, we certainly got over the major obstacle, which was the city council. Not that the city council were ever likely not to want to do this for obvious reasons. So it's probably 99.8% there, and it just needs this little kick just over the line. Hopefully the government will see sense and not be persuaded by UNESCO's arguments in particular. I think Historic England are less of an issue. It's their duty in a sense to object, and they will obviously make that objection, but it's not going to carry any weight. I think UNESCO is the only slight risk.
Yeah, very exciting news, as Terry mentioned as well. Probably the biggest news we'll have, well, as he said, in his lifetime, obviously my lifetime. It's going to be very sad to leave Goodison, obviously, but it's a few years off. But Paul, what have you made of kind of the regeneration that they're going to be doing outside Goodison Park after we leave?
Yeah, and that is, again, something that's to enormous credit to the club, that we could have sold the land to a property developer, and anything could have happened thereafter. If you cast your mind back to Kirkby Stadium, part of the proposal then was actually to sell the land and use the proceeds from selling Goodison Park at Kirkby itself. So to not do that and to actually, in a sense, gift the land to something that's going to be of enormous benefit to the people in L4 is great credit. Again, I criticise the club for being, in a sense, too community driven and not focused enough on football. But when you step back and you think, well, actually, this is what they're going to do, and these are the benefits that are going to be given to people that need it most, then you have to give them, all the credit you can give them.
Yeah, Terry, are you impressed with what they're going to do to the surrounding area in general?
Yeah, definitely. It's like Paul said. It's the community aspect of the club is very strong. Sometimes it comes in for a little bit of criticism for basically wheeling that out as a smokescreen for poor performance on the pitch. But this type of thing is certainly the club's, and more specifically Denise Barrett-Baxendale's strong suit, isn't it? The sort of moral responsibility that the club has to look after its area. There's a reason the club fully embraced the People's Club moniker, and it's because it fits them so well. And it's brilliant. No, I don't think anyone would have held, or certainly wouldn't have come in for exceptional criticism outside of the fan base if they hadn't have done this. If they'd have just said, "Yeah, we're just going to sell that to property developers. They're going to build X, Y, and Z on it." Said, but no, the club have been true to their character and said, "No, we're going to develop this area. We're going to gift it," as Paul says, back to the community, and it's brilliant. It's just very Everton. It's in keeping with the club's ethos, I think.
It's an interesting one, Terry, because actually the club are aware that using the People's Club sort of branding and doing all of this community work actually has a slightly negative impact on the club overseas when it comes to commercial arrangements. So, for example, if the club is talking to a company in the US, the company normally associates Everton with, you're that community club, or you're that community-driven club. And it's difficult sometimes to tie the qualities of a community club with, say, an organisation that's wanting to invest or sponsor sports organisations. Because normally, if you want to sponsor a sports organisation, you have a specific reason why you want to do that, because of the association with competitiveness, professionalism, and all that sort of thing. And being community-led or community-driven doesn't necessarily sit well with that. So it does, whilst it does enormous good in Liverpool, it does have a fairly significant impact on our attractiveness to purely commercial sponsors.
Yeah, I mean that speaks to the wider problem, wider challenge of how they market the club, though, doesn't it? I mean, the People's Club is very much parochial, sort of small, almost kindly village image of the club. Whereas I believe, with success on the pitch, you can have both, because Liverpool, rightly or wrongly, are perceived as this, we belong to the supporters, kind of club where part of working class heritage, etc. But they're also a international, sports brand, mega brand, aren't they? So I think you can have it both ways. I just don't think Everton have mastered how to do it. But I don't think in this instance that it's a bad thing that the club have lived up to the People's Club moniker, because there's some instances where it's harmful, like you've touched on, and in this case, it's a very good thing, because not many clubs would leave a legacy in the area they're leaving, so it it continues to survive once it's gone. So I'm really happy the club's done it.
Yeah, the plans they've drawn up for the area, they do look brilliant, and obviously we could probably briefly mention just the look of the stadium. Obviously, it's going to be tremendous on the dock. Obviously, I'm forgetting his name now. The original architect, Dan Meese, I think his name.
Dan Meese, yeah.
Yeah, Meese. Completely slipped my mind there. Obviously, he's been on Twitter. He kind of got this all in motion. It's going to look brilliant, in my opinion. It's going to look the best stadium in the league by an absolute mile. But don't want to dwell on that too much, because that'll be in previous videos. But obviously, with the stadium news, there does come the financial implications, which obviously I have absolutely no idea about. As an alarm goes off on my phone, so I'm obviously not too sure about the financial implications. So, Paul, if you want to just kind of give us a bit of information, it's all about, there's all sorts of sources of funding coming in. So, what's kind of the outline of it?
Sure. I mean, we've already spent £39 million, probably £50 million by June of this year, on preparing for the stadium, and the build cost, according to the planning application at least, comes in at 505 million. So that's well in excess of 550 million in total spend. Much of that is going to come through debt. So Sasha Ryazanstev is spending a lot of time talking to American investors who quite enjoy funding this type of thing. So probably 350 million of that is going to come through that. Some of it is going to come from a naming rights partner, which we all think is going to be USM or one of the USM companies. That might be another 100 million or so. And then Fahad Mashiri has committed to putting in whatever else is needed beyond that. So he will basically underwrite all of the costs over and above what we can borrow and what we can get in terms of sponsorship. In terms of financially, it's not the game changer that, for example, Tottenham's new stadium was with them, in terms of scale at least. But it will be very significant for Everton. We'll go from in the last accounts, last full year when we had fans in the stadium, £14 million coming in through match day income, to something around about £50 million probably in the new stadium. And that will obviously mean that ticket prices go up as well. But I think the club are still committed to, wherever possible, making ticket pricing affordable. But it will increase. So it'll increase from 14 million to around about 50 million. And then we've got the naming rights on top of that, and other commercial sponsorships that it will attract. So, it will be almost the equivalent of being in the Champions League every year in terms of the effect that it will have on our finances.
And obviously, how brilliant that would be if we did actually have European football for the stadium. And you mentioned Spurs there. Obviously, we all know about Daniel Levy and his spending, and there was a lot said about them not doing too much transfer business after they did build the stadium. Do you think that's going to be a problem for us when we eventually move? I think
there's no doubt that the lenders, whoever the lenders are, and that's not been announced yet, obviously, are going to have some say in terms of how much money we can spend in the future. And it has to be remembered that currently we're a loss-making organisation, so we have to either massively increase our income, not just the income from the stadium, but sponsorship and commercial income generally, or we have to cut our costs in order to be even break even, not even profitable, because at the moment we're a long way from that. So it's difficult to see that we could have another period like we've had in the last 5 years where we've spent relatively speaking, huge amounts of money in the transfer market. I think that puts a lot of pressure on Marcel Brands, who is about to sign a new contract, as we know. But it also puts a lot of pressure, I think, on the academy to actually start producing players that either can play for Everton or that we can sell, for reasonable sums of money to other football clubs, be it Premiership, Championship, or overseas. So the whole club really has to up its game, both in terms of commercial income, but also in terms of output from the academy. And obviously, output from the academy. The issue there is this a part of Marcel Brand's job, or does it just stay with Rhino? And that's a question that hasn't been answered yet.
Yeah. So Terry, what would you make of that then? If obviously transfer costs are going to have to be cut quite significantly, do you think the club's got it in them to increase the money they're making from transfers, or have better players coming through the academy? Because obviously for a long time the academy's kind of faltered. We haven't really had anyone too major come out for quite a while. So what do you make of that?
I don't think a new stadium, I think some people are getting a little bit ahead of themselves and think that it's going to, we'll suddenly be Man United and we'll just generate, all the money we ever need and what have you. It's not going to change the brief of the people in charge of the football side of the football club. We'll still need to generate, academy players. Everyone complains that we're not putting them in the first team. I'd be just as happy to produce 2 or 3 every year that we just sell for decent money. And I don't even mean big money, just decent money, and have a conveyor belt of talent that goes out into the Football League, the Premier League, lower down, etc. I think it's the same in the first team level as well. The cost of the stadium, as Paul said, then is going to be something like 550 million. That's that 3 Neymars. Like when it comes to football, the prices are just ridiculous. That if you can bring players in for low prices or relatively low prices and sell them high, it's healthy business as a football club. There's only probably about 10 clubs in the whole world who can operate in a way where they don't need to do that. Everyone else has to at some varying level. So if we were to say Richarlison, we were to flip Richarlison for, how much did we spend on him? 40 million, was it? Or 50? Probably for more like 40. But if we could sell him for 80 to 100, it not likely soon because of COVID, but in some point during his contract, if he was to go for a large profit, and we don't know who else is going to come in from them, that's probably the way forward regardless of what we do. We need to be self-sufficient or as close to self-sufficient. Now obviously we've not been like that of late. It's very well documented that we've spent bought high and sold low, but that has to end eventually, and that's clearly what Marcel Brands' brief is going to carry on to be, because he's going to sign a new contract, and he's going to carry on with that job.
Terry, it's really interesting because I think one of Marcel Brands, when he first came to the club, one of the reasons why he was attractive to us was that he knows the European market really well. So, like the Moise Kean type situation where, okay, sadly, it doesn't seem to have worked out for Everton that he becomes an Everton player. He might still, but even if he doesn't, we can sell him at a decent profit. I think that was always part of the plan. The difficulty looking forward is with Brexit, it's going to be much more difficult for Marcel Brands to bring in non-British players who aren't yet established, because under the point system for a work permit, you effectively have to be an established player. So it's going to be really interesting. I think, and it goes back to the first point I made about it is actually going to be driven by what happens in the academy rather than Farhad said the other day on Talk Sport that it's all about recruitment. Well, yeah, but if you can only recruit from the UK market, it's difficult to find somebody that's sort of, good value, unless we all of a sudden we have scouts that are prevalent in the Championship and Division 1 and Division 2.
Is there any? Sorry, Thomas. Is there any sort of hope that the Brexit regulations for overseas players could change? Because if it's obviously not looking great at the minute, but could the Premier League as a whole put pressure on I don't know who would be in charge of it, the Premier League, or the clubs put pressure on the Premier League or the FA, etc., to or even the government, I don't know, to loosen the regulations and the strings, so maybe now we could bring South American players in a little bit easier or something like that to compensate? Or is it very much we're going to take advantage of this situation and try and encourage clubs to bring nothing but British players through?
Well, sadly, without being too political about it, I mean, it's a fundamental part of Brexit that, freedom of movement within Europe has ended, and that Europeans shouldn't be treated any differently from South Americans or Asians or from any other part of the world. So I think it's difficult to see a situation where the government are going to relax what is a fundamental part of their, their policies, just to benefit footballers. I don't have a solution to it. I just think it's an interesting problem. That a potential area of expertise has effectively been blocked off by Brexit. It's not insurmountable. I mean, there must be, as there used to be in the sort of old days, a whole raft of players who can be developed, within these shores, be they Scottish, be they Irish, or or Northern Ireland anyway, at least, or Welsh or English. So I think it's just a change of emphasis. Yeah.
So we're likely to see more Branthwaites in the future than Nkunkus, basically, because it's going to be a lot easier to get them.
I think so. Well, I mean, we wouldn't have been able to get Nkunku under the situation that we're in now. Post Brexit, we wouldn't have been able to do that because he wouldn't have qualified on a points basis, given his relative inexperience, his lack of international football, etc. And that's the issue. So it's going to. A lot of people talk about how outside of the Premier League, how does the English Football League, for example, how can it be sustainable in the future long term? And actually, one of the strange impacts of Brexit is that it gives the English Football League the opportunity now to sell good players or developing players, young players, to Premier League clubs.
Well, that's you've basically hit it in one. Then if we're gonna spend money on players in the future, once we're in Bramley-Moore Dock, then we're gonna have to whip the academy into shape, and I think that is what Brands is moving on to now, hopefully, because he's made some changes, hasn't he, recently? But the academy needs to start being fit for purpose, producing players that we can make money off.
Yeah. Sorry, go on, Paul.
No, sorry, Thomas. I mean, it's 5 years this weekend since Farhad Moshiri arrived at the club, and he's been phenomenal in terms of the amount of money that he's put into the club. But one of the reasons he's put so much money in is because the club has not been particularly well run in that period, and just having a new stadium, just having Carlo as manager, just having Marcel Brands as director of football isn't enough. Everybody, and this is my opinion, obviously, everybody has to up the game and contribute more.
Yeah, definitely.
The academy, I think, is going to be a pretty significant problem if they haven't seemed to have got it right yet, and still the progress they're making, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. Obviously, the youth players in January got some good loans out. So obviously, Gordon went to Preston, Branthwaite, Blackburn, even though they're struggling at the moment. I think that's more of what we're going to need to see, and I think the whole situation will be as well. I think, again, not to get too political, but the Brexit situation, it's going to help the lower leagues, even National League and below, because obviously Premier League clubs are going to have to go fishing there, and maybe we will have to as well. But I think that pretty much brings us to the end of the video, because as Paul mentioned at the start, there's still this 0.8% chance, I think you said, that it won't go off. So we don't want to jinx it too hard, but obviously we're all very hopeful. It's been a brilliant week, and so brilliant news for the club this week. The stadium has made it past the approval committee. So now the Secretary of State, UNESCO, all that has to decide, but something very positive. So, thank you all very much for watching. Be sure to check out Terry and Paul's social media down below, and let's pray it gets over this final hurdle, and we will be in Bramley-Moore in a few years. So thank you all very much for watching, and join us next time on the Toffee Blues.